I'm really experienced and good at this. So I was really excited when Elise told me this month's theme would be wilderness. One, because the analogies between like creativity and being out in the wilderness are kind of constantly simmering in my brain. So buckle up for some heavy-handed metaphor. But also, as Elise mentioned, I just got back from a month-long trip out in the desert in southern Utah and northern Arizona. And as an introvert, I figured what better way to return to the real world than to speak to more people than I've seen in the last month combined. So, that's the wrong slide. That's okay. I guess I forgot to add one. Okay, it was supposed to be a picture of a sign that said, "Entering Zion Wilderness," so just imagine it. So if you Google the wilderness, a lot of the search results sound really scary, like how to survive in the wilderness or what to do if you're lost in the wilderness. You'll see the word wilderness paired with like desolate, extreme, hostile, barren. And this really frames the wilderness as something that you have to like make it through and not a place that you would stick around and enjoy or even thrive in. And that makes me sad because when I see a sign that says I'm entering the wilderness, I get really excited because for me, the wilderness is a place that's full of resources and inspiration. And obviously, it's a place to test your mettle a bit. And I found that a lot of my creative journey has felt a lot like navigating a wilderness. Sometimes it's uncomfortable and unpredictable, and you have to problem solve and find the path you want to take, and you don't always know what's ahead. But if you are willing to notice them, there are also always moments of curiosity and joy everywhere around you. So while I've had plenty of less than amazing days, both in the actual wilderness and the proverbial wilderness of creativity, I wanted to talk today about how we can actually enjoy our time there. But since I spend a lot of my time reading one-star reviews, it feels only right to present those thoughts to you in reverse. So let's talk about how to have an absolutely terrible time in the wilderness. Step 1, expect an easy, straightforward path. One of the most frequent complaints I see about national parks is how far apart things are or how long things take. And I think some people expect to just drive up and see like every cool thing in just a few minutes. When I was researching for my book, I actually learned that the average person spends less than 4 hours in a national park. So basically, they just resent all that wilderness for sucking up the half day they gave themselves to explore all of Yosemite and leave disappointed. And I think, I was not supposed to go ahead yet. Geez, I'm really bad at this. And I think the same is true for a lot of creatives. I know that I personally was often not at all realistic about how long the things that I thought I wanted would take and how much time and effort there would be. And even when I thought I knew where I wanted to go, it was pretty impossible a lot of times to imagine how where I was could even potentially lead to where I wanted to be. So most people don't know that Subpar Parks was actually not my first book. In 1994, first grade Amber wrote and illustrated this book about a tiger with a headache. From a really young age, thank you, she was really talented. So from a really young age, I declared that I wanted to be an artist. So it would be really easy for me to sit up here and pretend like I always knew it, it was meant to be, and I just did it till I succeeded. But that is not at all what happened. Art and I had this like meet cute in season 1, and then we took 10 like super frustrating seasons to actually get together. And it's because I always felt too scared to go for it. When I was in college, I was afraid of getting rejected from a BFA program. So I got a degree in advertising, and I took all of the design classes I could in the ad school and got a minor in art. And I think I thought I could just like reverse Irish exit like that Homer Simpson into the bushes gif into being an artist, and no one would notice or have to approve of me. And then after I graduated, I spent a year of existential crises as a nanny before starting working in marketing in 2011. And I was always trying to weasel my way into design projects. But my job was marketing to kidney doctors, so it wasn't super creatively fulfilling. So on the side, I started learning calligraphy, hand lettering, and watercolor painting. I took a ton of online classes and in-person workshops, and I was objectively not super great at first, but I was really excited. I was learning something new, and I was excited to come home and work on it every single day. And after a few years, my job made it clear that I needed to focus on marketing and wouldn't be allowed to do design work because I had to leave it to a real designer. So I quit. And in 2016, I got a job as an invitation designer. And I was trying to build my own wedding invitation business on the side. But after a couple of years, I realized that while I used a lot of my skills, the world of weddings is just not a great fit for me. So in 2018, I found a graphic design position at a local design firm. But the clients weren't always like the most creatively fulfilling for me, so I was just looking for a new creative outlet. And so I started practicing my digital illustration on my coworker's iPad during my lunch break. I loved it, and so I eventually saved up to buy my own iPad. And then in late 2019, I took illustrator Lauren Hom's Passion to Paid course, just to help me come up with like a structured side project, because she's kind of the queen of passion projects. And it was going through the exercises in her class that I came up with subpar parks. So I started posting the artwork weekly, and within a few months, it started to blow up. And since then, it's been a whirlwind of learning on my feet, how to create, sell, and ship products, how to prepare for interviews, which was something I'd never done, how to turn it all into a book. And now I'm apparently public speaking. And a lot of these decisions I've made felt really paralyzing at the time. I felt like I was faced with this like massive fork in the road, this decisive moment, and I had to just choose and forge ahead and never turn back. And I was so caught up in just worrying about making the wrong choice and being stuck somewhere I hated forever. But every time I made a decision and the world didn't suddenly end, it got easier to consider my options. And I've learned that it looks a lot more like this. There are a lot of different paths we can take, and they're intersecting and they connect back to each other. And there are points where you have to make a decision, but they're almost never absolute. I've personally encountered a lot of switchbacks in my life. I've pivoted a lot, changed direction, and even encountered some dead ends that I thought were going to be a viable trail. But I don't view any of that as wasted energy or time, because it's just all a part of the process. People always want like the quick version of how you got from where you were to where you are, but I don't think I can draw a straight line from anything I've done to what led to subpar parks. It was just a series of me like saying yes to ideas and things that came up and seeing where they led and figuring out a lot of things along the way. So the second way to have a terrible time in the wilderness is to expect the world to look just like Instagram. So if you're like me and your Instagram Explorer page contains a lot of outdoorsy photos, you may have seen pictures like this floating around. This is an area in Utah outside of Capitol Reef known as the Bentonite Hills. This photographer, I love him. I follow him on Instagram. He's extremely talented, and these photos are obviously incredible, but there is one problem. They don't look like that. Bentonite Hills are these mounded hills of clay and volcanic ash, and they do have a really cool gradient of color, like brown, red, purple, green, and gray. And during what photographers call the blue hour, the cooler gray and green layers do give off a blue hue, but he's been pretty transparent about just how much editing went into these. This is what they look like to the naked, unlightroomed eye. But the problem is those photos have gone crazy viral, and so many people come to see these blue hills now that when I was in Capitol Reef chatting with a ranger, talking about where we were driving to, she mentioned that we'd know we were on the right road when I saw the Bentonite Hills. And I was like, oh, cool. And her eyes got really wide, and in a panic, she was like, they're not blue. Like you see on Instagram, people get really mad when they realize they're not blue. So I think the lesson here is that the internet and social media can be a really great place to connect with people, learn new things, and even gather inspiration. But it's also a highlight reel that can make it hard to maintain realistic expectations about what your experience is going to be like. And even if you are super transparent about your process, when you're sharing a bird's eye view from day 2000, it's impossible to give a realistic picture of what lies ahead to someone on day one. And so when I get down on myself comparing myself to other artists, a therapist would probably be like, don't do this is terrible advice, but this is what I do. I like to go look at artists that I used to compare myself to and just see how different our paths are and how similar they are too. Because whether it's our artistic styles or the subject matter we create about or our business models, there are always similarities and there are always differences. And it kind of helps me snap out of it and remember that there's room for all of us. Someone else's success doesn't mean your failure, which is what I'm always afraid of when I get caught up comparing. If you also want to have a terrible time, you can do what everyone else does. I can't tell you how many reviews of national parks make it sound like the person had a gun to their head and they were forced to go there. A lot of people think they have to go and do the popular things or it's not a legitimate visit. And they don't even seem to ask themselves if they want to do that thing. A really great example of this is Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. I personally have a paralyzing fear of heights, particularly when it comes to steep drop-offs. This is over 1,000-foot drop, and you have to hold on to chains. Sounds terrible to me. So I know that I'll never do it, but every time I share that with people, I always hear oh, you'll be fine, I did it, just do it, it's great. And I've heard from people who caved to that peer pressure and did it and hated it. And they were like, but what was I supposed to do? Go to Zion and not do Angel's Landing? And I'm like, yes, it's 3 feet wide. If you don't like that, don't do it. But I've had the same pressures in my business and my creative process. I felt like I had to develop products that I had no interest in selling. I have done so much research about selling mugs. I don't want to sell mugs, but people ask for them all the time, so I feel like I have to. Or taking on client work that I didn't want to take on because it was a company I thought I always wanted to work with. But there's a saying in the backpacking community, hike your own hike. And it generally means to go at your own pace and not judge other people for what they do or don't bring with them on the trail or do. And I think it applies to a lot of life. It's kind of the backpacking world's you do you. And so whether you prefer to take a scenic drive and look at all the overlooks or hike several days into the backcountry where you won't see anyone, and whether you want to turn your creative hobby into your job or you just want to crochet weird things because it makes you happy, whatever you want your relationship with something to be is totally valid, even if it's not what other people think you should do. And if you're like me and you found yourself crawling on all fours in the Grand Canyon on a ledge because you're terrified of heights, Angel's Landing is probably not your hike. A lot of people go to parks and don't seem to take advantage of any of the resources at their fingertips. They skip the visitor center, they don't do any research, and they don't read any of the educational signs. And I was a little bit the same way when I started my business. I kind of thought I had to figure it all out on my own or it meant less. But I've really had to learn the hard way that having good people around you makes all the difference. Having people who will cheer you on and encourage you and give you a hand when you need it. Even if you're running a business by yourself or you like taking solo trips into the wilderness, you still need that support system around you to talk things through and check on you and be your lifeline. Everyone has heard of the movie 127 Hours, right? Where he has to cut off his arm in the canyon because he didn't tell anyone where he was. Learn from Aaron Ralston, community matters. I am an Enneagram 2. Anybody else a helper in here? Yeah, okay. So I love helping other people, but asking for help is not in my wheelhouse. I really struggle with that. And when I started selling products, like I said, I felt like I was failing if I didn't do it all on my own. And then the universe was like, you're gonna learn this lesson. So at the end of 2020, at the height of holiday shipping season, I was bouldering, which is rock climbing with no ropes, and I fell and I dislocated my elbow. And I was also working on the book at the time too, so I was very overwhelmed and now I was horribly injured. And it was a literal breaking point, and I was forced to ask for help from a lot of people. And as a person who often sees my mere existence as annoying for other people, it was really eye-opening to see not even just how people were willing to say yes, but how genuinely they wanted to help me. My in-laws texted me this year to tell me they were so sad they weren't helping me this year with calendars. Being around the right people just makes me so much more brave and adventurous too. I never thought I would do things like canyoneering, which is where you rappel off of a canyon wall. I'm terrified of heights. But because I found the right people to do things with who don't push my limits too fast but do encourage me, I've been able to do things like that. And it's been the same with putting myself out there creatively. When I first came up with the idea for subpar parks, I was really, really excited, and then immediately this voice in my head was like, Amber, that's dumb. But thankfully, my friends and family and my classmates in the Passion to Paid course were really encouraging and cheered me on. And I really might have let that doubting voice win if they hadn't been in my corner. And then when I had to choose between, leaving or staying at my day job or seeing where subpar parks could lead, I wasn't really afraid to take that leap because I felt like I had so many people around me who were just like championing me and genuinely wanted to see me succeed. But there is one caveat to this, because even if you have great people around you, you can't outsource your responsibility and agency. Even when you have help from people who know what they're doing, you still need to be prepared to do things on your own. On the trip I just got back from, a friend invited me and my friend Mallory to go hiking and canyoneering outside Zion. And we were with a group of locals, a lot of whom had way more experience than us, so we were kind of the newbies of the group, and we relaxed into that role. And so we did something we've never done before, and I will never do again. We didn't bring a detailed map of our own. I always have like a basic topo map loaded up on my watch, but I didn't download any of the specific trails to follow. And we had an amazing day rappelling and hiking through these gorgeous canyons, but on the climb out, our group got really spread out, and a lot of us ended up on the wrong trail. And it's really hard to describe the panic that sets in when you realize that you're on the wrong trail, on the wrong rock, and you can see where you need to be, and you have no idea how to get there, and daylight is disappearing. So we kind of had to decide whether we would backtrack several miles to where we realized we'd taken the wrong fork, or press on and find a way to hook up with the trail through terrain we didn't really know. And no one was looking to me or Mallory for advice or expertise, but I realized suddenly that we had the most information. I had that topo map, and Mallory had actually been tracking us on her watch all day. So I was able to combine those pieces of information and scout out a safe route to get back onto the trail, and we ended up leading everyone out of the canyon just before daylight disappeared. It turned out fine, and I'm really embarrassed that I even allowed myself to get into a situation like that. But it was a really powerful lesson in making sure I always maintain my own agency. Because at the end of the day, you know what's best for you, even if other people have advice for you. So unless you live under a rock, you've probably heard about the flooding in Yellowstone National Park. And as soon as I heard the park had to close, I was just waiting for the bad reviews to come online. And sure enough, this is not unique. There are a lot of bad reviews for things that are way outside of a park's control. And when I read reviews like that, I always try to compare my own trips to kind of imagine how I would react. And I realized that my experiences pretty much run the gamut of things people complain about. It's not possible to avoid things going wrong. It's pretty much guaranteed. I've had products show up with typos or color issues. I've had shipments be delayed by months, and I've just had to figure out how to fix those issues and make the best of it. And it's the same in the outdoors. It just comes down to whether you let it ruin your experience and make you give up, or if you take it in stride and figure out how to pivot and adapt. I think our relationship with wilderness and with creativity is defined by how we deal with challenges. I've personally become a big fan of things going wrong. Not like catastrophically, life-threateningly wrong, but just inconvenient, keep you on your toes wrong. I feel really alive and like I'm at my most creative in situations where things are a little outside my comfort zone and I have to rethink and problem solve. Even that story about getting kind of lost in Zion, it was scary in the moment and I was not having fun, but afterwards it was really cool to look back and see how much I knew and how capable I was and how quickly I dropped into that problem solving. The last thing I've noticed in a lot of bad reviews is this sort of that's it moment that people have. People see the trek somewhere as something like a toll that you pay to get there, and not a thing to enjoy on its own. And then once they're there, they stay for 2 minutes to snap a couple of photos. So on the whole, it's a high effort, low reward experience for them. And I think the same thing can happen when you get into a kind of achievement-oriented mindset about creative work. Some people want to appear on certain lists by a certain age or work for a certain big company, and some people want to visit all 63 national parks. There's nothing wrong with these goals, but I find that for myself, when I focus on things like that, I end up just checking boxes and doing things to say I have instead of letting myself fully experience them. Whether it's a hike or a creative project, when I get tunnel vision on that goal, I kind of stop enjoying myself. I get restless and impatient, and I lose sight of what it is that I actually love about what I'm doing. And then, when I get to the payoff, it doesn't even feel that good because I hated getting there and I don't give myself time to enjoy it before it's time to move on to the next thing. So I've made it a point to try to notice all the little things along the way. I love finding sago lilies blooming in the sand and spotting interesting patterns in rocks I pass by and noticing how the blue sky and the orange rocks play off of each other. I've come to really romanticize my time in the wilderness, and it's taught me to try to do the same in my life, in particular in my creative process. When I was working on turning subpar parks into a book, there was a period where I got really caught up in worrying if it was going to be successful and was it going to be a New York Times bestseller, which is a meaningless thing based on pre-orders. It doesn't mean anything about how good or bad my book is. And I felt like it wouldn't be a worthwhile thing to have done if it wasn't as successful as my publisher and I wanted it to be. And so I found myself just hating every drawing I did and deleting every paragraph I wrote. And there were so many small moments of joy and excitement in there that I was missing because I was so focused on this bullshit definition of what it would be to be successful. And that just wasn't the relationship I wanted with my creative work or with getting to make a book. That's the coolest thing ever, and I was hating it. So I had to kind of take a step back and start getting excited about the little details again. How awesome it was to chat with rangers about insider tips about parks that I loved and realize that they were excited to talk to me when tiny junior ranger 8-year-old Amber would be baffled by that. Or how cool it felt when I came up with the perfect spot illustration to fill in some space on a page, or the fact that I was being paid to draw bears from Katmai National Park's Fat Bear Week. I had so much fun creating the book that in the end it mattered less how well it did, and it also made it that much more exciting and emotional when it was a New York Times bestseller. When I fall in love with that process instead of the end result, that's when I personally feel like I've really succeeded. I'm happy and I'm fulfilled with what I'm doing, and it makes the payoff that much better because I got to do or see something really incredible, and I enjoyed the hell out of getting there. So I want to close with a story that I recently heard on a podcast about a mountaineer who died climbing K2, which is a mountain out in Pakistan and China. And his daughter shared that he climbed a lot of mountains in his life, but he always actually stood a step off the summit of every mountain he climbed throughout his entire life because it was never about conquering the mountain. It was about his relationship with the mountain. And this really resonated with me because focusing on the experience and the moments of curiosity and not the conquest is where the magic is for me. So if you're ever in a place where you're feeling blocked or struggling with your creativity, try to get back to the joy and just the experience of creating. Sometimes for me that requires me doing something entirely different, taking a pottery class and learning how to throw pottery on the wheel, or planning and building a sleeping platform in my Xterra, or learning to brew kombucha. Learning a new way to create always brings back that spark of curiosity and joy for me. Or, if you're really stuck, you can try heading out into the wilderness for a few days. But if you have a bad time, do not leave a bad review, because I will come for you. The end. Thank you.
Does anyone have a question? Please raise your hand. I will start. Oh, no, you start.
I was just going to say, we just got back from Zion last year, and one of our highlights was stamping our passport. Do you have a National Parks passport, and how full is it?
I don't. This is actually funny. I had a really long conversation with a woman at Black Canyon of the Gunnison on my trip about this, because she has this spiral-bound book. Do you have the one that has like all the National Park Service sites? Yeah, that's like 400 some places. It's crazy. And she like has extra pages that get put in when new ones are added, and like she's gonna pass it down to her kids and they're gonna complete it. And I was like, that's really cool, but it's also really not for me. I never really wanted to check them off like that. I know a lot of people get really excited about stamping the passport, and that's totally great if that's for you, but I know that for me, it would make me feel like I gotta go, I played Pokemon when I was a kid, like I gotta catch them all. And I don't want to fall into that, and I know that I will, so I don't.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm not the best projector, but I'll try. I really, really loved your story. And for me, I'm personally really passionate about the idea of connection and how we connect to ourselves, one another, to nature, to the universe. And something in my own research and personal experiences that I've noticed is that when people are in your situation and maybe actually are able to pursue those passions and just go for it and learn all these wonderful lessons, that almost something mysterious sometimes happens. And I'm kind of wondering, this may be a weird question and you might not have a response, but I'm curious in your experiences on the trail and just in life in general as you've grown closer to what brings you joy, have you had any interesting experiences that have been hard for you to kind of explain with words along the way? I don't know how to explain that question. I hope that makes sense. I'm just curious.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really great and intense question. I think there's been an interesting shift for me. I actually had like kind of a really emotional moment in the desert last month because there's this area in southern Utah called Vermilion Cliffs National Monument, and it's one of my favorite places on earth. But there's a particular area within there called Coyote Butte South, also known as not the Wave. The Wave is Coyote Buttes North, and people kind of forget about the south side of that formation, but it's really incredible, absolutely beautiful. And my friend and I have kind of ended up going every year. And I don't know if this is going to answer your question, actually. But, so it's just been really interesting, though, to see how my relationship with being out there has changed. And that since I go there every year, it's been sort of like a little litmus test for me. And the first couple times I went, it's kind of this place, there's not really a trail, and you're just kind of wandering around and seeing these really cool rock formations. And the first time I went, I was really caught up in like, oh, am I allowed to climb up on here? Or like, can I go over there? And I was very timid and nervous and not really my most creative, like open self. And then this year when I went, it was just, even though I was looking at the same rocks, like I think some people would be really bored by that. But for me, it was just this sort of like magic moment where I was like sitting where I was sitting 3 years ago, the first time I went, and just noticing how much has changed in my life since then, and also how my relationship with the outdoors has changed. Like I used to always be so stressed and worried about if I was doing things right or, what I was supposed to be doing. And now I'm out there just for the enjoyment of it. And I don't know when that shift happened, but I really noticed it really strongly this year that it had. And it's just kind of a cool thing to notice because I'm so much happier sitting in any random canyon than a lot of people are seeing like the iconic viewpoints they've waited to see their whole lives. And I think it's because my relationship with that has changed.
Thank you.
There's too many, Amber, you pick. There's too many.
Oh, God. Middle person in the black shirt. You're in the middle, yep.
We met a few years ago in my office, and
Oh, my gosh.
nice to see you. But the point about that is, I remember our conversation, and you saying, "I have this big dream to make some postcards." And that was like your next step. So congratulations on where you've come since then. But my question has to do with, you spend so much time reading, doing the thing that people say not to do, which is read the comments, and reading bad reviews. So my question is, what is your relationship with your own comments in that?
Yeah, that's a good one, because it's not the best. No, no, that's okay. It's kind of an interesting, like, I feel in some ways like I have the cheat codes to like the universe, because I'm like, I know what bullshit a lot of those reviews are. But at the same time, it's really hard. I think like some people who have left bad reviews of like my book and stuff, they like knew that I would laugh. So they tried really hard to be extra mean. So that was fun. But yeah, no, I mean, for the most part, I think I have a really good relationship with it. Especially, when you have an account on Instagram that's as big as Subpar Parks is, you get people who come in hot and think like that I'm a corporation, and so they can be super mean to me. But I have pretty thick skin about it. Most of it just kind of slides off. There are definitely times where I get really down about it, but I try not to let it get to me. It's been a process. It's a lesson I will be learning for a long time, I think.
I'm just wondering what software you use to make your illustrations.
Yeah, so I mainly draw in Procreate on the iPad. I've drawn a little bit in some of the Adobe products on the iPad, but I'm so used to Procreate now that I think it'll be impossible for me to move, but yeah.
So my career is social media management, and so I think part of the reason why I love going out into nature so much is because I'm forced to disconnect, and like it's a good excuse for me to be like, really can't do this right now because I have no service. So with your huge social media presence and like the importance of social media to Subpar Parks, I'm just wondering how you find a balance of like staying connected to that, but also enabling yourself to fully disconnect and have those amazing moments in the wilderness.
Yeah, so generally on my trips, because every year now my friend and I go out for a whole month, and I have my laptop with me, but I think I opened it all of 3 times this year. So I know I'm not going to be on email or anything like that, but because, the trips and the travel that I do feel kind of related to Subpar Parks, I always do try to share some of that. But in general, I actually think I'm probably like people who work in social media would cringe at me because I'm just like, oh yeah, I forgot about Instagram. Like, I think I haven't posted new artwork on Subpar Parks in like a month right now. So yeah, I'm more on the side of I forget it exists a lot and forget like, oh, I should have told people about that. I should have shared that. So it's generally pretty easy for me to just kind of disconnect.
So as you were describing your process of building the book and finding joy, I'm wondering, this is kind of a twofold question because I have 2 wonders. Are there any Easter eggs? Do you have Easter eggs in your work? And then 2, the gentleman had asked about the critiques and the comments. One of the hard things about being a designer is you always have someone who's like, well, technically bears have 6 toes or whatever, right? So how do you, what is your process of putting stuff out there, whether you're intentionally putting an Easter egg to get someone to notice or you're accidentally made a mistake?
Yeah, I don't think I have any intentional Easter eggs. If you have the first edition of my book, Crater Lake is not in Washington, it is in Oregon, whoops. I did actually know that, for the record. It was a copy and paste issue, and I stand by that. But yeah, no, it's funny because people who love national parks are very quick to correct you, and I've tried to be like, well, I took artistic liberty, because also in the first edition, actually I think this is just finally, because they forgot to fix it, it's just finally being fixed in the current reprint that they're doing, but the reflection in the illustration for the Tetons is all messed up, and it's because someone reached out to me when I first did the illustration and was like, hey, really cool illustration, but just so you know, the viewpoint you drew is technically outside of the park because the Tetons are backwards. And I was like, okay. But when it came time to do the book, I was like, I'm gonna fix it. And I fixed it and didn't fix the reflection. So it's really messed up. So yeah, I try to ignore the people who try to like nitpick and correct because it just messes me up.
Okay, Amber, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Yeah, last question.
Make it good.
I really liked the example of the lily and the cracks in the rock and then the orange juxtaposed with the blue sky. How about when we, come home from the wilderness? I'm curious how that view and perspective of life has affected your quotidian, daily, ordinary life.
Yeah, I think it really has. I felt myself when I came home last week. I was like, I haven't been in my house with my husband and my cat for like over a month. And I live in a really old house. We bought a house that was built in 1896 and we've been fixing it up over the years. And so it's really imperfect and has a lot of issues. But I walked in and I was just like, God damn, my house is beautiful. And like, I still feel that way when I walk into my house now. And it obviously fades over time, you start to take things for granted again. But it is really nice to have that, like going out into the wilderness for a bit always sort of like resets me and helps me kind of appreciate all the things. Because I also I have an employee now who handled all the orders and stuff while I was gone and all the customer service emails. And I did not really have that last year. My husband kind of handled it with this other person we'd sort of temporarily hired. So I kind of came home to a bit of just like a list of okay, you got to email this person and this is going on. And so it's kind of overwhelming and not the best. But this year I have an actual employee who has been handling stuff. And I walked in on Monday into the office and I was like, lay it on me. And there was nothing. I was like, wow, everything's been handled. The office is beautiful. Everything's organized. So yeah, it really does help me appreciate all the little things in my life that are going well.
So, well, everyone, let's give Amber another round